Hello, I'm Elise Vance, the author of the channel Borrowed Lives, and I offer you fascinating stories. Like and subscribe to my channel.
After my confession to my childhood best friend was crushed under the weight of his clinical speech, I sobbed until my eyes burned in Mrs. Eleanor's conservatory. But then, by some stroke of absolute fate, I caught him through the narrow gap of his studio door. Marcus was staring blankly at a framed photograph of me on his drafting table, completely lost in his own chaotic world. He ran a hand through his dark hair and muttered, his voice hoarse, "God help me, I'm in love with her, Elena." I pressed my palm against my collarbone, trying to quiet my pounding pulse. A slow, amused smile curled my lips. Unbelievable. Who knew this stoic idiot was harboring such a feverish secret? When Marcus finally walked out into the hallway, he caught me with my arms wrapped around his mother, looking like the most devastated soul alive. "Mrs. Eleanor, I've decided it's best if I move into my own loft tonight," I sniffled, executing my role as the heartbroken victim flawlessly. Eleanor wiped a stray tear from my cheek, her heart aching for me. "Don't listen to that clumsy fool, darling. This house will always be your home." I gently stepped back. "I've already packed everything. My taxi is outside." Marcus, who had been pretending to search for his car keys, froze instantly. His gaze locked onto the bright yellow vintage trunk resting near the entryway, his face drained of all color. "Elena, what is this nonsense?" "No one asked you to leave," he said, his voice unusually tight. "Can't a woman simply prefer her own apartment? Your loft is across the river. How are you going to manage the morning commute?" I ignored his sudden panic and grabbed the metal handle of my trunk. In 2 quick strides, Marcus stepped directly into my path, blocking the heavy oak exit. "My mother adores having you here. Besides, I drive you to the architectural firm every single morning and take care of your schedule." "Are you seriously walking away?" "Yes." I looked up, meeting his tense gaze dead on. "You said it yourself, Marcus. You told me my feelings were just a comfortable habit because we've shared the same roof for years. You said a little distance would make me realize I'm destined for someone else." I let the silence stretch between us. "I spent the entire night thinking about it, and you were right. So I'm going to go out there and see what the rest of the world has to offer." Marcus went completely rigid. His mouth opened to construct a logical argument, but no sound came out. Behind his back, Mrs. Eleanor silently flashed me a subtle thumbs up with a sharp, knowing nod. I rolled my heavy trunk past his shoulder and stepped into the crisp evening air. The moment the front door clicked shut, I heard the sharp sound of Eleanor's hand smacking hard against Marcus's shoulder blades. "You utter fool. What are you standing there for? Run after her." "Mom, I only view her as a younger sister." "Stop lying to your own mother. Do you think I haven't watched you stare at her for 5 years? Stop playing deaf and blind." I don't understand, Mom." I didn't turn back, but a triumphant smile was already blooming across my face. "Marcus, if you enjoy playing the tragic, unapproachable hero this much, I am going to make you pay for every second of it." Back in my minimalist loft, I lay across my bed and scrolled through years of text messages with Marcus. From our university days to our current jobs at the engineering and design complex, we had communicated every single day. He had never failed to look after me. When I stayed up late drafting floor plans, he would mysteriously appear with warm chamomile tea and spiced pastries. If a sudden thunderstorm hit the district, he would be standing in the lobby with an umbrella before the sky even darkened. If I casually mentioned craving a specific artisan roast from a coffee shop 3 neighborhoods over, he would quietly take a 40-minute detour just to drop it on my desk. Yet when I confessed my feelings 3 days ago, his immediate defense mechanism was to build a wall. "Elena, can you honestly distinguish between love and a long-standing routine?" he had asked, sounding like a cold professor delivering a lecture. "Do you even know what real romantic attachment feels like before throwing such declarations at me?" I had been so furious and deeply hurt at that moment. But looking back now, as he delivered those clinical lines, his fingers were trembling against his coffee mug, and his posture was stiff as iron. What an absolute fraud. I tossed my phone onto the mattress. On my first day back at my loft, I deliberately didn't send him a single word, determined to play his little emotional game. He remained completely silent as well. The chat window stayed frozen. The second day passed with zero activity. On the afternoon of the third day, a single notification finally lit up my screen from Marcus. "Elena, are you really not returning to the townhouse?" Looking at the screen, my lips curved into a smug, satisfied smile. "Oh, Marcus. Only 72 hours and you're already losing your composure. You have absolutely no game, yet you tried to play me. Hilarious." I flipped the phone face down on my desk and returned to drafting my blueprints, leaving his message unread. On the fourth day, he managed to exercise restraint and didn't follow up. I was in no rush whatsoever. After clocking out of the firm, I happily joined my fellow architects for a rooftop dinner party. A few cocktails in, I snapped a cheerful group photo and uploaded it to my social media story. In the photo, my cheeks were flushed a soft rosy color, surrounded by handsome urban planners and vibrant colleagues laughing under the bistro lights. Within 8 minutes of posting, a text from Marcus flashed across my display. "Are you out drinking? How much did you have? When are you coming back to your neighborhood?" Of course, I let it sit. A second later, my phone began to vibrate violently. I answered, keeping my tone deliberately light and airy. "Send me your exact location," his voice demanded, rough, urgent, and devoid of its usual composure. "I'm coming to pick you up right now." "There's no need, Marcus. Someone is already escorting me home." A heavy, suffocating silence stretched over the line for a few agonizing seconds before his tone sharpened into a blade. "You're tipsy and you're just going to get into a stranger's vehicle, Elena? Do you have a single grain of common sense left in that head of yours?" I smirked silently into the quiet night air. He was practically dying of jealousy, yet his pride was still as stubborn as granite. I decided to press his buttons even harder. "He's not a stranger. Actually, he's my new project partner." I let out a soft, dreamy sigh. "You were completely right, Marcus. My feelings for you were just a silly habit. I'm so glad you rejected me and forced me to open my eyes. Thanks for the reality check." Without giving him a single second to reply, I ended the call. He tried dialing back 5 times in a row, but I ignored every single chime. A delicious, electrifying thrill rushed through my veins. When the dinner concluded, I walked out of the venue side by side with Julian. Julian was a brilliant new lead designer at our firm, tall, impeccably dressed, wildly charismatic, and most importantly, genuinely interested in me. He had offered to drive me back to my loft. The moment we stepped onto the cobblestone street, a familiar black sedan caught my attention. Marcus was leaning against the front fender, arms crossed tightly over his chest, his gaze locked onto the restaurant exit with lethal focus. A split second later, his dark eyes pinpointed me with laser precision. Impressive. He found the location so quickly. He really didn't disappoint. Pretending to be utterly caught off guard, I widened my eyes in mock surprise. "Marcus? What on earth are you doing here?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes swept over my flushed face before landing icily on Julian standing beside me. I introduced Marcus to Julian in a sweet, overly polished tone, referring to him as my childhood family friend. Julian offered a polite nod and reached out, about to guide me toward his car. Suddenly, Marcus's hand clamped firmly around my wrist. "There's no need to trouble yourself," Marcus said, his voice terrifyingly calm and clipped. "She's with me. She lives at my residence." Before Julian could even process the words, Marcus pulled me toward his passenger side, completely ignoring Julian, who was trying to call after us. He slammed the door shut, climbed into the driver's seat, and hit the accelerator, the tires screeching against the pavement as we sped away into the night. I sat in the passenger seat in complete, icy silence, my face darkened to look as if he had just ruined the most romantic evening of my life. Marcus glanced at me several times, opening his mouth as if to say something, but closing it each time. I knew exactly what he was attempting. He was waiting for me to break the tension first, just like I always did in the past. Even now, he was desperately clinging to his pathetic pride. He clearly hadn't realized that the balance of power had completely shifted. Fine. I closed my eyes, leaned my head against the cold window, and pretended to drift off to sleep, maintaining absolute silence all the way back. When the sedan finally stopped, I opened my eyes and looked out at the familiar iron gates. Of course, he had brought me back to his townhouse. "You're staying here tonight," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. For once, I didn't argue. I stepped out of the car, walked upstairs to my old room, went inside, and shut the door behind me with a decisive, heavy click. I knew that absolute silence was the ultimate form of psychological torture for him. "Enjoy it, Marcus." After a long, scalding shower, I collapsed onto the bed. Just as I was about to drift off, a soft, hesitant knock sounded against the wooden panel. Marcus stood on the other side, his voice low and muffled through the door. "Elena? Are you asleep?" I remained perfectly still, refusing to grant him a single sound. He lingered outside for a long, agonizing moment before his heavy footsteps slowly faded down the corridor. I rolled over and pressed my face into the pillow. The fabric smelled of lavender and fresh linen. I had noticed the second I walked in that the bedding wasn't what I had left behind. They were brand new sheets, imported, featuring the exact minimalist geometric pattern I had saved on my mood board months ago. Since Mrs. Eleanor was away on a business trip in Milan, Marcus had to have changed them himself. Even the small frame sketch of me on the nightstand had been shifted slightly to the center. A sudden image popped into my head. After I walked out with my yellow trunk, Marcus must have wandered into this dark room countless times, staring at my picture and drowning in his own foolish regret. If he knew it was going to hurt this much, why did he have to play the detached philosopher and reject my confession in the first place? Oh well, this was the absolute best setup to train him properly. The next morning, I made sure to slip out of the house before Marcus even woke up. As I passed through the kitchen, I noticed a carefully laid tray on the marble island. Of course, we grew up together. He knew my morning routine down to the second. A freshly toasted croissant sat beside a cup of dark espresso and a small handwritten note. "Elena, please drink your coffee before heading to the site." I took a single bite of the delicious pastry, crumpled the note into a tight, merciless ball, and tossed it into the stainless steel bin. The food was brilliant, but I couldn't care less about his little notes. I wanted to see him broken, begging on his knees. For the next week, my schedule was executed like clockwork. I left the townhouse at 7 in the morning and didn't return until 10 at night. I didn't know what Marcus had told my parents, but my mother had actually sent the rest of my wardrobe back to his house, likely using Eleanor's name as a clever excuse. But Marcus didn't dare show up at my architecture firm to corner me. I had explicitly warned him that if he dared sabotage my professional collaboration with Julian, I would simply move into Julian's spare loft instead. That single threat terrified him to his core. He completely shifted his tactics, sending tentative, cautious texts throughout the afternoon, asking if I would be home for a home-cooked dinner. Sometimes I texted back a flat no, and sometimes I just left him on read for hours. However, I still ate the gourmet breakfast he prepared every single morning, and occasionally I would throw him a small bone and let him drive me to the site. You can never keep the leash too tight when you're training someone. You have to pull, hold, and release. On the 8th night, I returned home particularly late. Marcus was sitting on the dark leather sofa in the main lounge. The television screen was flickering silently, but his eyes were completely hollow, fixed on nothing. On the dining table, several pristine, elaborate dishes sat entirely untouched, cold. When he heard my heel click against the hardwood floor, he stood up instantly, his voice raspy and hoarse. "You're back." "Yeah." Julian and I grabbed dinner after reviewing the blueprints. "You should eat your food." I kicked off my heels and immediately headed toward the staircase. "Elena," he called out from behind me, his voice sharp with desperation. "Are you planning to maintain this wall between us forever?" I stopped on the second step and turned to look down at him. "What do you mean?" "You've completely shifted. You look at me like I'm a ghost." Marcus took a rigid step forward, his throat working hard as he swallowed. "You're furious with me because I rejected your confession last week, aren't you, Elena? Tell me the truth. Is this all just revenge?" I tilted my head, masterfully putting on a look of pure, unbothered innocence. Why on earth would I be furious? I told you before, your cold analysis actually helped clear my head. Julian and I have been getting along exceptionally well lately. Marcus's knuckles turned white as his hands curled tightly into fists at his sides. Is that so? Absolutely. Julian is refined, attentive, and treats me with actual warmth. It feels refreshing to be around someone who doesn't treat every emotion like a math problem. I deliberately let my eyes drift down to his trembling fists, a subtle smirk touching the corner of my lips. Wait, Marcus, you aren't actually jealous, are you? His stoic expression froze for a split second before he let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Jealous? Of some corporate designer? In your wildest dreams. Perfect. I almost laughed out loud right then and there. It was time to bring out the heavy artillery. I offered him a warm, dazzling smile. Good. Then you won't mind at all when Julian asks me out on a proper, formal date this weekend. Marcus went entirely rigid. For one beautiful, glorious second, his whole face emptied of expression. Then he forced out a dry laugh, so brittle it practically shattered in the air. Julian? That new project lead. Yes, that project lead. You barely know the man. I barely knew calculus once. Now I use it to design skyscrapers. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle twitched near his ear. Elena, don't be naive. A man like that likely uses those smooth lines on every female architect in the district. I tilted my head slightly. Funny. The only man playing juvenile mind games with me lately is you. The words struck him like a physical blow. Marcus's lips parted slightly, then closed tight. I could practically see his hyperlogical brain short-circuiting in real time. Deny, rationalize, grab her, confess, panic, make espresso. The last option was probably winning in his mind. I crossed my arms over my chest. Also, don't ever drag me out of restaurants again. Don't grab my wrist like I'm your property. And don't tell other men I live under your roof when you've made it abundantly clear that I'm just a comfortable childhood habit. Marcus's dark eyes flickered with vulnerability. I didn't mean it like that. Then how on earth did you mean it? Silence. Cold, heavy silence. Exactly. I took one slow step down the stairs toward him. If I'm only your younger sister figure, then start acting like a proper brother and stop glaring like a lunatic at every man who stands within 3 feet of me. His throat moved again. For a terrifyingly thrilling second, I thought he might finally break and say it. His hands clenched tightly. His dark eyes locked onto mine with fierce intensity. And then, his stubborn mouth betrayed both of us once more. Go to bed, Elena. You're exhausted. Amazing. Truly breathtaking. A grown man could stare at my photograph in his private studio, whisper to the empty room that he was dying of love for me, storm into a luxury venue to snatch me away from a rival, prepare my favorite artisanal breakfast every single morning, and still choose the exact sentence guaranteed to execute him emotionally. I smiled even brighter. Good night then, brother. He flinched as if struck. I turned around and walked up to my bedroom. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me. I pressed my back against the frame and covered my face with both hands to stop myself from laughing out loud into the dark. Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. At this rate, I'm going to need a full training manual, a whistle, and maybe his mother's antique umbrella. That night, I heard pacing outside my room 3 separate times. The first time, he stopped and stood there in absolute silence for 10 minutes. The second time, he stepped so close to the wood that I could see his shadow cutting through the gap under the door. The third time, he whispered my name into the quiet hallway. Elena. I didn't offer him a single breath in response. He waited, let out a shaky sigh, and slowly walked away. I slept like royalty. The next morning, breakfast was waiting on the marble island again. A perfectly toasted croissant, warm espresso, a small dish of fresh raspberries with the leaves removed, and a note, Elena, don't skip breakfast. Also, don't call me brother like that ever again. I stared at the note for 10 full seconds. Then I burst out laughing. Unfortunately for his pride, his emotional paralysis didn't cancel his culinary skills. I ate every single bite, placed the porcelain plate neatly in the sink, and left the handwritten note right where it was on the counter. No reply. A man had to experience true starvation before he deserved dessert. At the architecture firm, Julian brought a fresh cup of iced coffee to my drafting table. A peace offering? For what? I asked, looking up from my structural sketches. For getting dragged into your childhood war the other night. I coughed to hide a sudden laugh. Was it that obvious? Elena, the guy looked at me as if I had personally invented the concept of heartbreak. I tapped my stylus against the tablet screen. I'll manage him. Julian leaned against the edge of my desk, his expression softening into something genuinely kind. Are you really okay? That question was entirely too gentle. For a split second, my confident facade slipped, and the lingering humiliation of that original rejection returned, Marcus standing there in his suit, asking if I even knew the difference between love and a familiar routine. Looking terrified, yet letting me bleed alone. I murmured. Julian nodded understandingly. No pressure. No grand speeches. But let me ask properly. There's a city urbanism showcase this Friday evening. Would you like to attend as my guest? I looked up at him. Julian smiled warmly, not as a weapon for my game, but as a genuine invitation. Not as a tool for revenge. As an actual date. Though I'm fully aware I might be stepping onto a minefield holding a champagne glass. I laughed softly. You're remarkably brave. Just curious to see how this story ends. I thought about Marcus's note, don't call me brother like that, and then about my own bruised pride. All right. Friday night. When I checked my phone during lunch, Marcus had sent 4 consecutive messages. Did you finish your espresso? Are you working late at the firm tonight? Do you need me to pick you up? Elena, answer your phone. Instead of replying, I took a picture of the elegant digital invitation to the Urbanism Showcase and posted it directly to my social media story with the caption, Friday night plans. I didn't tag Julian. I didn't need to. Marcus called within 6 minutes. I let it vibrate until the very last chime before answering. What? His voice was terrifyingly calm on the line, a fake, rehearsed composure that was the most delicious flavor of all. The Urbanism Showcase? Yes. With whom? Why? Are you auditing my professional schedule now? Elena. Julian asked me out properly, I said smoothly. The silence stretched so long I could hear his rhythmic breathing over the receiver. Finally, he spoke, his voice unusually strained. You're really going with him? Yes. You don't even enjoy formal urbanism panels. I work in structural architecture. It counts as culture. His tone dropped an octave, deep and raspy. I can take you somewhere far better. I leaned back in my leather office chair, my heart racing. Why on earth would my brother take me on a date? Silence. Then, extremely low, stop calling me that. My heart gave one stupid, betraying leap. I crushed it instantly. Then stop acting so utterly confused about what you want. And I hung up. The next day, Marcus launched what I privately labeled Operation Panicked Housewife. He packed an exquisite gourmet lunch for me in a sleek thermal container. He placed my favorite imported truffles in the fridge with my name clearly written on a sticky note. He messaged me at 2 in the afternoon asking if my office chair was ergonomic enough, offering to order a custom executive one for my desk. At 4:15, a notification flashed on my screen. It might rain near your office. Do you have an umbrella? I looked out the window at the completely clear, brilliant blue sky. I replied for the very first time in days, is the umbrella for the rain, or to catch your tears? He didn't reply for 20 agonizing minutes. Then, a single word, Elena. Poor, tortured soul. By Thursday evening, Mrs. Eleanor finally returned from her business trip in Milan. I knew the exact second she stepped inside the townhouse because I heard the heavy front door swing open, the quiet roll of suitcase wheels along the marble hallway, a long pause, and then her ringing voice. Marcus, why on earth do you look like a disowned golden retriever? I nearly dropped my face cream in my bedroom. Marcus's low, exhausted voice echoed from the lounge. Mom, please. I'm just tired. No, tired people lie down and sleep. You are sitting in pitch darkness, with a fresh bouquet of peonies on the table and Elena's chat window open on your screen. This is not fatigue, my boy. This is absolute clown behavior. I quietly cracked my bedroom door open an inch. Marcus was slouched on the leather sofa, looking thoroughly miserable. Beside the wrapped flowers on the glass table, his laptop screen was glowing with an open search page. How to confess love to a lifelong friend without destroying everything. I slapped both hands over my mouth to smother a burst of laughter. Eleanor stared at the laptop screen, then at her son, and back to the screen. You rejected her, dragged her out of a restaurant, baked for her, stalked her dinner party, and now you're moping in the dark pretending you're not consumed by jealousy? Marcus, if denial paid rent, you'd own half of Manhattan. Mom, it's complicated. No, taxes are complicated. Quantum physics is complicated. You are simply being stupid. I slid down against the wooden door frame, my shoulders shaking violently with silent laughter. Marcus groaned, burying his face in his hands. I was terrified she'd regret it if we failed. Eleanor crossed her arms, her tone razor-sharp. So your genius solution was to reject her first and make sure she regretted confessing in the first place? Bravo, brilliant logic. I thought if we dated and broke up, I would lose her forever. And how is your grand master plan working out so far? Eleanor hit back instantly. No answer came from him. Eleanor let out a sigh so heavy the houseplants practically withered. If you call that poor girl your sister one more time, I am changing the security codes and keeping Elena for myself. My heart melted just a little bit. Only a little. I was still fully committed to the training program. The next morning, Eleanor cornered me in the sunroom while Marcus was in the shower. She placed a plate of warm pastries before me. I heard about this Julian character. News travels fast, I smiled, taking a sip of tea. My son looks like someone unplugged him from his primary power source, so yes. Did he deserve this? Every single bit of it, I said plainly. I know, Eleanor agreed without a second's hesitation. She patted my hand gently. He hurt you, darling. My throat tightened, and my playful mask slipped for a fleeting moment. He made me feel foolish for loving him. He asked if I even knew the difference between real love and routine, like I was a child confusing a crush with a lifetime commitment. Eleanor's eyes softened with deep warmth. That foolish boy thought if he challenged your emotions, you'd step back into the safety zone. He didn't realize that real love isn't a drill. Don't beg him, Elena. I won't. She leaned in close with a wicked wink. Make him work. Make him speak. Make him sweat. Just don't break him so badly that I have to return him to the factory. I laughed through the sudden tightness in my chest. Does he still have a warranty? Expired years ago, my dear. Friday evening arrived. I dressed in a sleek, tailored emerald silk dress, teardrop pearl earrings, and a shade of crimson lipstick that signaled a woman who was either attending an elite gala or executing a masterpiece of revenge. In my case, both. As I made my way down the grand marble staircase, Marcus was standing near the bottom landing. The second his eyes landed on me, he froze, completely motionless. That single, breathless look almost threatened to ruin my entire grand plan. Almost. Mrs. Eleanor, sitting in her armchair with a cup of Earl Grey, didn't miss a single beat. Marcus, close your mouth, darling. You'll catch flies. He snapped his jaw shut, his neck flushing a dark red. I picked up my clutch from the console table. Don't wait up for me. Marcus immediately took a step forward. I can drive you to the venue. Julian is picking me up at the gate. His fingers twitched into tight fists. Of course he is. Eleanor casually took a sip of her tea. The man owns a car, Marcus. Civilization carries on. Right on cue, the front chime rang. Julian stood at the open doorway holding a bouquet of fresh, vibrant orange tulips, bright, cheerful, and sophisticated without being aggressively romantic. A clever choice. You look stunning, Elena, Julian said warmly. Marcus's face darkened into an icy mask right behind me. I accepted the flowers with a radiant smile. Thank you, Julian. Julian glanced past my shoulder and offered a polite, calm nod. Marcus. Marcus nodded back with the exact expression of a man swallowing broken glass. Eleanor appeared beside us with suspicious speed. Julian. Lovely to see you again. Tell me, do you cook? Julian blinked, caught slightly off guard. I manage a few signature dishes, yes. Wonderful. My son has been trying to win a woman back using toasted sandwiches and severe emotional constipation. I nearly choked on my breath. Marcus looked utterly betrayed. Mom. Julian's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. I can cook, Mrs. Eleanor, though I'd prefer not to compete with a man who slices toast into emotional apologies. Eleanor looked positively delighted. Oh, I adore this young man. Marcus looked as though he had just been stabbed with a butter knife. The urbanism showcase was exquisite. Julian was a fantastic companion, attentive, witty, and perfectly professional without crowding my space. He listened intently when I discussed sustainable facade structures, asked sharp questions, and made no inappropriate moves. Halfway through the reception, my phone vibrated in my clutch. A stream of notifications from Marcus. Are you safe? Have you eaten anything proper? Is he driving you back? Elena, do not ignore this text. I smiled at the glowing screen. Julian glanced down, catching the look. Your childhood friend again? Unfortunately. Julian handed me a glass of sparkling water. Elena, I genuinely like you, but I have zero desire to be a prop in someone else's dramatic romance. My smile softened, a prickle of genuine guilt hitting my chest. Julian, was I really that transparent? To me? Completely. To Marcus? Probably not. The man looks like he desperately needs emotional subtitles. I laughed out loud. Julian leaned back against the high table. I'm not offended. I invited you because I respect you, but I can clearly see your heart is still sitting in that townhouse, eating geometric toast and pretending not to care. I let out a soft sigh. He rejected me, Julian. Then make him apologize like a real man. I am. Oh, I noticed, Julian smirked. The poor guy looks one minor inconvenience away from writing tragic poetry. Sunday evening became the final battlefield. It was a private dinner held in an exclusive dining club for our firm and key industry partners. Mrs. Eleanor came because she was close friends with the gallery owner. Marcus came because Eleanor flatly announced she needed a chauffeur, then sat in the back seat laughing at his expense the entire ride. Julian arrived right by my side. He helped me with my coat, pulled out my chair, and asked if I preferred wine or sparkling water. Marcus sat directly across from us with the exact look of a man attending his own funeral while the corpse flirted with someone else. Eleanor whispered loudly enough for the whole table to hear, "Oh, marvelous. He's about to experience actual consequences." I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Julian executed his role flawlessly, not overly intimate, just warm and attentive enough to send Marcus into absolute agony. Julian complimented my latest structural draft, and I laughed brightly. Marcus's water glass made a sharp cracking sound under his white-knuckled grip. Eleanor eyed the glass. Marcus, if you shatter that lead crystal, you're paying for it. Emotional damage isn't covered by restaurant insurance. After dinner, soft jazz echoed through the lounge. Julian stood up and politely extended his hand. May I have this dance, Elena? I had barely brushed my fingers against his palm when Marcus stood up abruptly. Elena. I turned slowly. His face had gone eerily calm again. A dangerous sign. Can we speak? Privately. I glanced at Julian. Julian stepped back with complete composure, stepping out of the line of fire. I'll grab some air outside. Marcus walked toward the quiet terrace hallway, and I followed. Eleanor, of course, trailed at a distance, pretending to deeply admire a oil painting on the wall. Subtle as a siren. In the dimly lit corridor, Marcus turned to face me. Are you enjoying this cruel game? Immense satisfaction, actually. His dark eyes flashed. Elena. What? You told me to put distance between us. I did. You said I'd prove you were just a habit. I'm currently breaking it. His stoic facade shattered with every sentence. I took a step closer, tilting my head. Isn't this precisely what your logical mind wanted? No. The word ripped out of him before he could stop it. I lifted my brows. No? His chest heaved. No. Then tell me, Marcus. What do you actually want? He looked away, his jaw working hard. Unbelievable. Still clinging to his pride. I let out a soft laugh. Careful, Marcus. Brothers don't look this tormented. That broke him completely. He spun back so fast I nearly took a step back. I'm jealous, he shouted, the hallway going dead quiet. Even Eleanor stopped pretending to care about the painting. Marcus's eyes were bloodshot, raw with unfiltered agony. I am completely, violently jealous of Julian. I'm jealous of every single man who gets to look at you without having to swallow his own voice first. I'm jealous because he had the guts to ask for what I was too terrified to admit I needed. My breath caught in my throat. He took a step toward me, then forced himself to stop, giving me space. I told you that you couldn't distinguish love from routine because I was terrified that you could, and I was the pathetic coward hiding behind logic, Marcus rasped, his voice trembling. I have been in love with you for years, Elena. I loved you when you fell asleep on my structural engineering textbooks in university. I loved you when you stole the last slice of pizza and pretended you didn't. I loved you when you worked late and forgot to eat, so I drove across town with fresh tea because I couldn't stand the thought of you suffering. My eyes burned with sudden tears. He let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. I loved you so much that when you confessed, my first reaction wasn't joy, it was pure panic. Because if I became your lover and we failed, I would lose the only person I never learned how to live without. I rejected you because I thought distance would protect us. Then you walked away, and I realized distance was just losing you in slow motion. The smug triumph in my chest dissolved into raw emotion. But I wasn't letting him off that easily. You rejected me with a clinical lecture on psychology, Marcus. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? His face crumpled. I know. You don't get to call my heart a habit and then panic when I try to move on. I know. You don't get to drag me out of restaurants or play the protective older brother while glaring at every man who breathes near me. I don't want to be your brother, he said, his voice dropping into a desperate plea. I never did. Eleanor made a satisfied sound from behind a potted palm. Thank the heavens. Marcus shot his mother a brief glare before looking back at me, totally exposed. I was a coward. I hurt you. If you truly don't want me anymore, I will step back. But if I have even the slimmest chance left, let me earn it properly. I crossed my arms. Then start now. Apologize to Julian. Done. Admit to your mother that you were a fool. Eleanor stepped up from behind the palm. Already documented, but I'd like it in writing. Stop calling me your childhood habit. Never again, Marcus swore, his gaze locking onto mine. Let me treat you as the woman I love. Julian walked back in right on cue, as if summoned by a director. Marcus turned, stepped forward, and bowed his head slightly. Julian, I owe you an apology. I treated you like an enemy because I was too weak to face my own feelings. Julian studied him for a long moment, then nodded easily. Apology accepted, Marcus. She was never mine to take, but she was never yours to claim without earning her either. The next morning, I walked into Marcus's private studio to borrow a sketchbook. Lying open on his drafting table was a sheet of heavy paper. The bold heading at the top nearly made me double over. Operation: Stop being an absolute idiot. 1. Apologize to Julian. 2. Delete the word sister from vocabulary. 3. Stop kidnapping Elena from social gatherings. 4. Confess without sounding like a college textbook. 5. Ask Elena on a proper date before mom officially disowns me. I burst out laughing so hard I had to lean against the table. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his ears turning bright red instantly. You weren't supposed to see that. You left it right next to my pencils, I smirked, folding the paper neatly. You forgot number 6. What number 6? Survive your mother's commentary. Eleanor's voice floated up from the kitchen. Add number 7. Stop looking like a rejected stray every time Elena checks her phone. Marcus closed his eyes in utter defeat. Mom, please. I stepped closer to him, looking up into his soft, hopeful eyes. So, Marcus, where are you taking me tonight? He didn't take me to a Michelin star restaurant. He drove us to the tiny, hidden bakery near our old university campus, the one where he used to buy me warm cinnamon pastries whenever I failed my structural design reviews. We sat at the small corner table by the window. There were no grand speeches, no theatrical displays, just 2 warm pastries, hot coffee, and Marcus holding my hands across the table as if I were the most precious structure ever built. Elena, he murmured, his thumb gently tracing my wrist. This isn't routine. It's not childhood safety. It's my choice. Will you go on an official date with me? I let the silence stretch for a few delicious seconds, watching him sweat, before a slow, radiant smile spread across my face. Took you long enough, you beautiful idiot. He exhaled a massive sigh of relief, leaning across the small table to pull me into a deep, tender kiss, one that carried zero fear, zero doubt, and no clinical excuses. Behind the counter, the old baker clapped softly. Danny, or rather Marcus, thought rejecting my confession would preserve what we had. Instead, it taught him the agonizing reality of what losing me actually felt like. He wanted to play the detached, unbothered hero, so I made him fight for every inch of my heart. And by the time he finally stopped calling love a habit, he had transformed into the exact man I wanted, one brave enough to choose me out loud. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect, or harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next story.